with my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight, and we are jumping on tonight to talk some NBA on our regular night. I feel like this might be a regular length episode, so we are, I think, fully healthy. Right? We're fully
We're
healthy at this
we're
point,
fully healthy. Yeah. Listen, we're fully healthy. I'm
unlike
jacked
the
up.
NBA.
Unlike the NBA, I'm jacked up about basketball right now. I'm all about basketball right now, Mike. It's just March Madness is coming next week. We got the NBA season kind of winding down a little bit. Yeah. State of Ohio playoffs going on. Some crazy scores in some games today. Uh, and yeah, so maybe the system does need to be fixed a little bit, but I think it's going to be fixed next year, maybe theoretically, right? But we'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see. But anyways, yeah. So we're going to talk NBA, and I think we're going to look at this. We know we spend a lot of time talking about the Cavs and where the Cavs are, and I was just talking to Mike before the podcast. Like I watched the Cavs regularly, and then I kind of just watch as much other NBA as I can, but I've been watching and paying attention to the Cavs, and obviously in the last week we've beaten the Timberwolves and the Celtics, and we've lost two terrible games. And I don't consider the loss against the Suns as a terrible loss because when you don't start, was it three of your starters and four of your rotation players, and you were still in that game, I felt like they at least competed yesterday. I mean, heck, you had Damian Jones and Isaiah Mobley playing big minutes, like rotational minutes yesterday. So, and those guys have not been in the rotation at all. So I don't know how you feel. I don't consider yesterday's loss a bad loss because Phoenix started all their starters and we started two. I don't know. Would you consider
Well, Suns
yesterday's?
had all three of their theoretical big three out on the floor playing, which hasn't happened very often this season. So the consensus
I,
seems to be
I
that
think they said they
when
were 16
Phoenix
and
has
5
those three guys,
before the game yesterday. I read that they were 16 and 5 when all three of them started. I think was what I saw. They'd played 21
which makes
games.
sense. I mean, offensively, that's a pretty potent team when you have those three guys out on the floor. And the Cavs hung in there. They were right in the game all the way up until the end. And so, yeah, I don't consider that one a bad loss. The night before, when you lose to Brooklyn, who's basically been DOA for the last 2 months, losing that game, I think, regardless of who you have out on the floor, to lose that game at home, kind of disappointing. The thing with the Cavs has been they're just completely up and down.
They're
And one
yo-yo.
night
They're
to the next, I
yo-yoing,
know,
Mike.
yeah, yeah, it's very strange that you can beat Minnesota one night, beat the Celtics one night, and then turn around and you're losing to Chicago or you're losing to the Nets, whatever it may be. So, look, the team is clearly at this point compromised without Donovan Mitchell, their best player, but also being without Evan Mobley. And they just continuously have to shapeshift to be able to figure out how to put together lineups that they can actually throw out on the floor. And so I think when you look at it right now, you would have to think that barring a complete collapse, that they're going to be able to stay at worst in the 3 seed. Now we're recording. Milwaukee was down last time I looked. They were down by 20 to the Kings tonight in the first half. And if Milwaukee were to lose that game, the Cavs would only be a half game behind the Bucks. And
They're
the Bucks
down 19
certainly,
at
although
halftime.
they've
They're down 19
so
at halftime.
the Bucks have played better as of late, but I'm still not sure that they've figured everything out. And you still have Middleton out with the ankle injury, which I know he's been quoted as saying that it's the worst ankle injury that he's ever had in his career. And I don't know that there's a firm timetable for
Is
him
he
to
gonna pull an
return.
Otto
And so
Porter, Mike? Is he gonna pull an Otto Porter at
maybe
some point here? I mean, my
he
body's too
might. I
broken
mean,
down. I
he's
mean,
been,
he's been so injury prone the last 3 years, like just unable to play consistently.
well, maybe he pulls the plug. I doubt he pulls the plug this year, but
Yeah.
maybe at some point in the offseason, if he just can't get it back together, maybe he does. But Milwaukee is clearly playing better, but I don't think that anybody at this point is saying the Milwaukee Bucks have completely figured it out and they now become this unbeatable juggernaut. I don't think that's where we are with Milwaukee. They've been very good, both offensively and defensively, in the last 5 minutes of close games. Obviously, offensively, you owe a lot of that to the presence of Dame Lillard. Defensively, I'm not sure what you chalk it up to, but look, the Bucks, when you have Giannis and you have Dame, clearly their top end potential is very, very high, but they also have lots of other guys that I'm not sure how much I want to depend on any of them in a playoff series. So we'll see what happens. I think my guess is the Cavs probably finish third, but I wouldn't be stunned if they finish ahead of the Bucks too, just depending upon how and when Middleton, if he does return or doesn't return, and the Cavs get some of their guys back, maybe they can push ahead of them because again, after tonight, I'm guessing they're only going to be a half game back of Milwaukee, so one game in the loss column. So we'll see what happens.
Yep. So we want to look at this as perspective of who are the Cavs want to avoid that's below them in the first round of the playoffs. I mean, and I don't know if you want to do like we want to rank them but I think that it's clear and obvious that the team that I don't want to play in the first round that's below us is the New York Knicks, right?
Yes.
That's the team. Honestly, I think I'd be okay playing almost any other team, which probably means that we're gonna probably play them in the first round because I'm saying that right now. Like it's just
Or do you want to exercise some demons and play the Knicks?
no. I
No,
want
neither do I. I agree.
no exercising of demons here. Let's exercise our demons with someone else. I'd rather play anyone else. Like I think probably second, just because, and then they've, a team that I constantly I bring up is Miami. I probably wouldn't want to play Miami in the first round after New York. Anyone else, I feel like Indiana seems somewhat compromised. I know they beat the Wolves tonight, and Halliburton had a good game tonight, but he's not looked himself since he came back. And there's just something about Indiana that I feel like we would match up good against them. I just think our offense, and I know their offense is good, but I think our offense is good too. Now, once again, this is all hinged on the fact that Mitchell comes back, and now he's been upgraded to questionable for tomorrow's game. So I'm going to assume he's going to at least give it a go tomorrow. Um, and Mobley's the big question because I mean he's still in the walking boot as of this morning. So how much longer is he going to be out? Like I don't know. Like man, it's we seemingly get everyone back and then someone else goes down and like when as much the only guy who's in our starting lineup that hasn't missed. Obviously Strus didn't miss anything until this week, but Jarrett Allen really hasn't missed much. He's been him and Strus have been really the only people that have been there, and then all the time we're missing someone else. I think the Knicks are one. I think the Heat are two, and then after that, I'll play anyone. I think we match up against anyone pretty well after those two teams, and I still think we match up good against the Heat, and theoretically against the Knicks we match up well, but they're just in our heads right now, and I'd rather them play like I don't know anyone, anyone but us.
I would prefer to avoid the Knicks. I think just because of what happened last season. Although, as we were talking before the podcast, who knows when Julius Randle is actually going to be back tonight? I think Anunoby I believe this was his first game back.
It was. He warmed
tonight.
up he warmed up tonight with the intention of playing, and then he ended up playing.
As they kill the 76ers who score below 80 points tonight. So the Knicks clearly are on the rebound. I'm not sure yet what Mitchell Robinson's status is when he comes back. Obviously, he was a guy that the Cavs had a huge problem with last year in the playoffs, and they just could not get him boxed out for whatever reason. And he just destroyed them on the offensive glass. And also, we know that in the last two playoff series that Jalen Brunson and Donovan Mitchell have matched up, that Brunson has got the better of that matchup, despite the fact that I'm guessing most of us would consider Donovan Mitchell to be a superior player to Jalen Brunson. So I think you're right when you say the Knicks kind of have our number or they're kind of in our head. Part of me, like I said, wonders, hey, let's play the Knicks. Let's try to exercise those demons. But I think, again, it's not necessarily a great matchup just because of how physical New York is. And as good as Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley are, they're two skinnier guys. And if last year was any indication, the potential for them to be out physical against the New York Knicks is certainly more than a remote possibility. And so I think if you're the Cavs, you're hoping that you're not going to see the New York Knicks. Now, if Cleveland stays in the third spot, the Knicks right now currently are a game and a half ahead of the Pacers for that sixth spot. I mean, when you really look at it, if you go from the 4 seed to the 8th seed, you're really only separated by 2.5 games. So, which is all those teams are closer bunched together than the Cavs, who are 9.5 back, and then the Knicks, who are 12.5 back of the Celtics. The Cavs and Knicks are separated by 3 games, and the Knicks and the Heat, or an eighth, are separated by 2.5. So there's a lot of fluidity here, which is why we kind of wanted to approach this of, hey, if you're the Cavs, who do you want to play? Who do you not want to play? Who are you kind of, doesn't really matter one way or the other. So I think you're right. I think the Knicks are clearly number one. I think you look at Miami and you say, okay, they trade for Terry Rozier. He's been hurt. When he's played, they're still kind of trying to get him integrated. I think the thing with Miami is it's hard to evaluate them just on the surface as a regular season team. When you think about that old Bill Parcells quote of eventually your record kind of is what you are, I think Miami is maybe the one exception in professional sports to that. It always feels like Miami is more than what their record is. And you start looking at, okay, Jimmy Butler obviously steps up his play in the playoffs. We know what Bam is. You got Tyler Hero there. You got Duncan Robinson there. You have Terry Rozier now. I think that you got Jaquez. Miami just feels like a team that ton of playoff experience, probably the best coach in the league. That seems like a team that you would want to avoid. So I agree with you. Those are the top 2 teams. If you had to put a team next, who would you put after that?
I mean, probably Indiana, right? I probably go in, or well, actually, you know what? No, I'm gonna say Orlando and then Indiana. I mean, Orlando has no experience, but I don't feel like
They have good top end talent, but they have
yeah,
no
yeah,
experience. I agree.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's probably Orlando and Indiana after that. I
And I still
I,
feel like I don't want to play Philly, as dumb as this sounds, because I don't think that Embiid,
they scored
I
79
don't think,
points in back-to-back games, Mike.
but I feel like we don't, I feel like we don't, I don't know. There's something about, it's kind of like it. I don't like playing Atlanta and I don't like playing Philly. I feel like we don't play at our best against either one of those teams. And the idea that you end up playing Philly and somehow Embiid comes back for the last 4 games of the regular season and he's able to play through and maybe play 4 or 5 good games in a first round playoff series. I don't think that's completely out of the realm of possibility. Again, I don't think that Joel Embiid is going to strap the Philadelphia 76ers on his back after having missed a third of the regular season or half of the regular season or whatever it'll be by the time he gets back and lead the Sixers to an NBA championship. But if Embiid were to come back and play a couple regular season games and be quote unquote healthy for that first round playoff series, I wouldn't be super excited about that. And to be honest, like I said, I feel like we have not played our best against the 76ers. And I know we beat them early in the play-in tournament or the in-season tournament this year when they had a bead. And that was probably one of the Cavs' honestly better games of the year that they played when they beat them in Philly. But I think I would rank the Sixers ahead of Orlando and Indiana simply because of A, the playoff experience, and B, the slight possibility that you're getting back an NBA MVP sliding back into the lineup at the last minute, and that flips that team from being what might be a typical 5, 6, 7 seed into a team that, if Embiid had been healthy the whole year, probably would have been a top 3 seed. So I would probably put Philadelphia third. Then I agree with you. I think Orlando and Indiana are 2 teams, young teams, not a lot of experience together. Certainly, neither one of those teams collectively has very much playoff experience. You can look at Indiana and say Siakam won a title when he was with the Raptors, so maybe he gives them a leg up as far as leadership goes. But as you said, Halliburton, since he came back from the injury, he hasn't looked the same. I mean, pre injury, you think back to how good he was during the in season tournament, and the way people were talking about the season he was having. And it feels like since he's been back, he has not approached that level. And look, Indiana, their offense is still top shelf, but in the playoffs, you have to be able to play some defense. And although Siakam upgraded him on that end, I'm still not sure Indiana's ready to play playoff defense. On the other hand, right, it's compare and contrast with Orlando. They are a top 5 defensive team, but their offense, as Zach Lowe has repeatedly pointed out, is on track to finish below 20th in the league for, I believe it's like 15 consecutive years that they've been in the bottom 10 in offense, which is kind of interesting when you think about, again, how good Paolo
Is that
and
since
Franz,
is
or at
that
least their
since Dwight
potential are.
Howard left? Is that basically since Dwight
I
Howard
think
left?
so. I believe that is. Yes, I believe it is. So I think I think those two teams are two young teams, each of them slightly different, but those are series that if the Cavs were to match up with Indiana or Orlando, I would feel pretty good about their chances, and I would be stunned, completely stunned if they were to lose to either of those teams. I would not be stunned if they lost to the Knicks. I would not be stunned if they lost to the Heat, but I would be stunned if they lost to Orlando or Indiana. And then that leaves us to the last two teams, Chicago or Atlanta. I just feel like we never play well against Atlanta, and
Well,
the Bulls have even given us a
Trey
little bit of
being in
trouble
Trey
this
being
year.
injured. I mean, I know
Right,
we
out
just
for the
lost to
season.
him, but
I think I'd probably rather play the Hawks of those two teams, just because the Bulls with DeRozan and Kobe White's improvement. And say what you want about Vooch, he's not a very good defensive player, but he can put the ball in the basket sometimes. I think Chicago in a playoff series would make you work a little bit harder than Atlanta. At least I think so.
yeah, I mean, like you said, DeRozan has experience, and now that Lonzo Ball's back sitting on the bench for them, it's really exciting for them. Like,
Hey,
do you see that? Someone
he's got
said
to earn his
Lonzo Ball sitting on his bench, sitting on the backpack of the bench, and then someone wrote like prayer emojis. I'm like, prayer emojis. This guy's been like collecting a big ass paycheck. Excuse my language. Sorry, big paycheck, and he hasn't done anything. He's
well.
been almost as bad as Ben Simmons.
Look,
Did
Lonzo.
you see that? By the way, did you see the tweet of Ben Simmons' availability the last 3 years? And someone wrote, he's if you could explain the McDonald's ice cream machine in availability in NBA players or something like that, and I just laughed because I thought it was pretty
What's the
funny.
analogy? What's the
Well,
analogy?
the every time you go to get ice cream or a shake, the shake machine at
Oh,
McDonald's is
it's not
down.
working. Right.
It's not working.
It's not really working. So
Yeah,
every time
yeah.
you go to get something out of Ben Simmons, it's not really working. It's down. His back is down, or his mind is down, or
Speaking of backs, by
whatever
the
it
way,
may be.
Kawhi exited the game tonight with he like threw his back out or something. It looks like.
It's not looking good for the Clippers. I mean, they had their stretch, and now it feels like they're a little bit dinged up. And I just don't know how you buy into the Clippers, right? I mean, ultimately, the injury history of at least PG and Kawhi would lead you to believe that they're not going to be healthy.
And
Is there anything on the East before? I know we're
oh,
jumping to the
sorry,
West. Is there
sorry,
anything
sorry.
else in the East that we need to talk about?
Oh
No,
well,
we're
I
good.
guess
But is there
we didn't
anything
mention
else?
we didn't mention Mosley's contract extension. I don't know if you want it. Like,
Good for
congrats
him.
to him.
Good for
Like,
him.
congrats to him. I mean, he deserves it, right? I mean, I don't think there's
Yeah.
any argument there. I mean, he's taken a team that. I mean, they were not projected to do as well. They're almost the Cavs of last year, right? This year, like
Right.
you
Yeah. Close
like
to it. Probably younger.
I mean,
Younger, obviously, without
obviously
the
they
Mitchell
didn't have
piece.
Donovan Mitchell piece was huge for the Cavs last year, but I'm just saying like it's definitely big news for them to be as good as they are, and not only that, but huge for Orlando to lock him up and at least like seemingly be setting him in the right direction.
Well, and he's a
Come
guy, right, that when we talk about, at least, and I know I talk about it, that he's the archetype of the kind of coach that I would prefer to hire, where you're not hiring a retread guy who we know is basically a mediocre coach. Instead, you're taking a chance and hiring somebody who doesn't have head coaching experience, and maybe he turns into a good coach. And look, does that always work out? No. Sometimes you get Adrian Griffin. Sometimes you get Jamal Mosley. And there's no guarantees. But what I do know is that if you hire a guy who's been an average NBA coach for 15 years, guess who you're getting? An average
An
NBA
average NBA
coach.
coach.
Right. So I like
Do
and
you know who? Do you
prefer
know who I think of? Do you know who I think of when I think of average NBA coach, Mike?
who?
Randy Whitman.
Randy Whitman. I would say Randy Whitman probably
Maybe below.
aspired to be average. Probably was
He get
a below average
he kept
NBA
he
coach.
kept getting jobs though, Mike. He kept getting jobs.
He did. I agree. I agree. Guys who
Would you
keep
okay?
getting
What about
jobs.
Tom Thibodeau? What about Tom Thibodeau? Would he be an average NBA coach because he's never won a championship?
I think you'd probably say Tibbs is slightly above average. I would say
Okay, I just was trying to think like because he's not won an NBA championship, so I don't know.
Billy Donovan, average NBA coach, was with Oklahoma City, did fine with the Bulls, did fine. If he were to ever
He
get
was a good
fired,
college coach. He was a good college
I'm sure
coach.
he would get right. I'm sure he would get another job at some point.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure he would get another job.
That type of guy, I think, is what I'm thinking of. I think, in
Okay.
all honesty, the NBA probably does a better job now of giving new blood. There was a stretch, I would say, in the mid 2000s where it felt like we were hiring guys that had been in the league for 25 years, and those guys kept getting jobs over and over again. Whereas now
Yeah.
it feels like we've had a lot of new blood of guys that have come in and been assistant coaches or whatever that have been given their opportunity. So that's the kind of coach again that I'd prefer to hire when given a choice. So
Okay.
let's wrap it up at the Eastern Conference with just talking about the fact that Boston and Denver, the two, I think, teams that most people, when you're looking at the top of each of the conferences, despite the fact that Denver right now is still tied with Oklahoma City, I think most people think Denver, best team in the West, and Boston, best team in the East. And those two teams have matched up twice, two close games. Denver has won both of those matchups. Jokic has been pretty much unstoppable in both of those games. And I think to me, you can analyze a whole bunch of different things when it comes to these games between these two teams, and you can look at it and you can try to project out what would happen in a series. But I think ultimately it's something that we've talked about here on the pod a bunch of times that when you talk about superstars, you're talking about guys like Jokic who are top two, top three, top five, guys who can carry your team to a championship, and they're going to do what you need when you need it, as many times as you need it, and consistently do it. And then you have guys who are maybe one step below that. And I still think that that's where I would put Jason Tatum. Not that
Jason
Jason
Tatum.
Tatum isn't capable of fantastic, incredible games. Think about when he beat the Bucks in game 6. Think about what he did last year in the 76ers series, where he puts a team on his back, and I think he had 46 in one of those games and 51 in the other. So he's certainly capable of that, but from a consistency standpoint, we talked about LeBron being a metronome, right? Like this guy, you know what he's going to do night in and night out. And maybe he exceeds what you think he's going to do, but he very rarely underperforms. And I think like that's a level that Nikola Jokic is on, and that is not a level that Jason Tatum is on at this point in his career. And you could say whatever you want. And maybe Boston has a deeper team. They're probably going to come in with a better regular season record. They're going to have home court advantage. But if those two teams match up together, I trust Nikola Jokic to figure out what Denver is going to need from him, and he's going to put that out on the floor compared to Jason Tatum being able to figure it out for the Celtics and putting that out on the floor again for 7 games. I mean, Tatum might have 4 terrific games, but he's going to have 3 games, his history suggests, where he's going to be average. And
Yeah.
that's not going to happen to a top tier superstar. So I
Here's what I'm
think
going to tell
despite
you,
the fact
Mike.
that Boston has what
I was just going to say, I don't have faith that Boston's getting to the finals.
here's the thing, like I don't love Boston, and we've talked about it before. I think Tatum is one step short of being the type of superstar that's capable of carrying his team all the way to an NBA title. I think, though, it goes back to our discussion of last week of who do you really think can win the Eastern Conference? And we said Boston, Milwaukee. I think you said Miami, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not sure. The Knicks, as currently constituted, maybe if they were fully healthy and they were able to get Julius Randle back and Mitchell Robinson, maybe somehow, some way I could talk myself into the Knicks. But I just think and I think Miami, to be honest, is pretty unlikely that they're going to go
But
on a Cinderella
but
run
maybe
2
Jimmy
years in a row.
Butler's new hairdo is gonna inspire them.
Maybe, maybe, maybe the Afro Puffs will end up working out for him. But
I want to call them
so
pigtail
basically, then you're
puffs,
saying,
Mike.
there you go. Well, whatever. So then you're looking at, is Milwaukee teams? I don't think either one of us really thinks the Cavs are going to win 3 playoff series in a row to get to the NBA Finals.
No,
I would be
listen.
very surprised
Would
by
I be
that.
would I be pleasantly surprised? Yes.
Absolutely. But I don't think it's likely to happen. So basically then you're telling me that if Boston's not going to make the finals, that Milwaukee is going to, which again, I don't think that's unreasonable. When you talk about Giannis having an MVP season, you're talking about Dame, at least offensively in the clutch. And maybe he hasn't been up to the same level that he played at last year in Portland, but he's certainly more than capable of being the best player, at least from an
Yeah.
offensive standpoint, on the floor in any given game. So I think if you look at the Eastern Conference, you have to say that if Boston doesn't get out of the East, it's going to be disappointing. Yet at the same time, I can look at it and say, if
It will not be
Boston and
disappointing
Milwaukee
to
end up
me. It
matching
will
up,
not be disappointing to me.
it will not be disappointing. Right. It will not be disappointing to you or to me, but to many around the league and Boston fans in particular, it'll be disappointing. To me, I look at it and I say, a healthy Milwaukee, I really feel like, I don't want to say is the only team, but it doesn't feel like when you just look at the names and you say, okay, Boston's going to play Orlando. There's there's no way Orlando can beat Boston, or Boston's going to play the Chicago Bulls. There's no way they're going to lose that. And yet at the same time, Boston has these weird, whether it's moments, whether it's series, whatever.
22
And
points with 9 minutes left against the
there's a
beaten
history,
up
right? I mean, there's
Cavs.
a history. There's a history from an individual game standpoint, and there's also a history from a series standpoint in the playoffs.
And
And
there's a
so,
history with this coach who I don't know if he's a good coach or not.
yeah, I don't think anybody's convinced that he is. I think there's some things that people have talked about this season that they've liked, but I still think there's a question as to whether or not in the playoffs, matching which wits with the best coaches, that Joe Mazzulla is going to be up to that level. I mean, who knows? It remains to be seen. It hasn't been proven yet to this point. I do think that when you look at the Eastern Conference, I think barring something really strange happening, I think it's probably Milwaukee or Boston. But yet, I just don't fully trust the Celtics. And I don't even want to trust the Celtics. Like, I despise the Celtics. So it's not like I'm looking for reasons why the Celtics should win. But when I look at their team and I look at how they've performed and their lack of consistency, and just the fact, again, that more often than not, you have to have the best, one of the 2 or 3 best players in the league on your team in order to win a title. And I just don't think Jason Tatum is at that level. I mean, I certainly don't slot him in the top 5. Where he is in spots 6 through 10 is arguable, but he clearly is not a top 5 player. And it's hard to see. It doesn't happen very often where a team without a top 5 player wins a title. It's pretty rare.
Yep, I agree. I mean, when was the last one? So let's think about this.
And we got to. I got to pull up a list of NBA champions, or I'm not going to be able to. I'm not going to be able to pull
the Toronto Raptors with Kawhi. Would you say Kawhi was a top 3 player at that point?
Kawhi was in that playoff run. I mean, in that playoff run, he was clearly one of the 5 best players, and a fully healthy Kawhi during that season would have been considered one of the 5 best players in the league. You're just not getting a healthy Kawhi the whole time.
I was just trying to think. We're going to go back to when San Antonio beat the Heat in 2013. because I wouldn't say that Tim Duncan was a top 5 player. I wouldn't say,
No, at
like,
that point,
and
and
even
Kawhi
Kawhi wasn't there yet.
wasn't there yet. So yeah, I think
Because
that's
then the other
probably
one, the
fair.
one before that would be 2011, the Mavericks. Like that would Dirk was not a top 5 player at that point. I mean,
I would say probably not. Dirk was probably a top 10, probably a top 10 player. And then you go 2 years of Kobe. Then maybe you could argue that the Celtics with Pierce and Garnett, depending upon again how you value those guys in the league, maybe not.
So
Let's put it this way.
2013 is or 2014 is, if we're going all the way back to 2014 to come up with one, because obviously you had 15, 16,
You're talking
17,
about you at
18,
least have
LeBron and Durant,
yeah.
Steph. So yeah.
You at least have the shell of one of the best 5 players in the league, and Tim Duncan. Now, clearly, Tim Duncan wasn't.
Would you say the Mickey Mouse championship in 2020, LeBron or Anthony Davis was the best 5 player in the league? Or is that just such an anomaly because it's the Mickey Mouse championship?
I think it's probably an anomaly, but you could certainly make a case for one or both of those guys.
LeBron was the best 5.
Points.
Was LeBron the best 5 in the bubble?
Probably.
God, could you remember? Do you
point.
remember, Mike? Do you know yesterday was the 4-year anniversary of the NBA shutting down? Can you believe that was 4 years ago? Like,
no, that feels like it was seriously like yesterday. It really does.
To me, it feels even longer than that. It feels so it's
Does
been
it
a long
really?
time. It to me, it just feels like it's been a long 4 years. I don't know why. I just think there was a lot of,
I feel like that was just. I feel like it was just yesterday.
And what's crazy to think about, Mike, is like Ellie, my daughter, my second youngest, my daughter, as she was born 2 months before the pandemic started. So like she doesn't really know what happened, like the world before the pandemic. She obviously was a baby during the main, but still it's a little crazy. It's crazy to think that I'll always be like, oh, Ellie, you've been alive since right when the pandemic started. Congratulations!
Right. Her life is her life is always intertwined with with
So
the pandemic.
I don't know, but
well,
yeah,
let's hope we don't have to ever live through that again.
Yeah, I hope so too, and I don't think I don't want to say I don't think. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah. Who knows, man? The world is a crazy place.
There are clowns everywhere. So
there are clowns. There are clowns everywhere. All right. So
wait, can I ask you one more? Can I ask you one more question? I didn't ask you. What did you think of Rudy Gobert's technical foul and fine?
Well, there's a lot of levels. There's a lot of levels to it, right? So the first level is, come on, Rudy, what are you doing? I mean, even if that's what you think, you clearly know that flashing up the money signs at that critical juncture I think it's the reason, like, that technical is the reason why NBA players don't seem to particularly care for Rudy Gobert and his personality. I think that summed that part of it up. And if you're Gobert, it's just dumb because you know that you're going to get teed up for that if anybody sees it. Now, on the other hand, I think that, look, I don't want to make the leap that the NBA and its officials are in collusion with DraftKings and FanDuel and casinos and everything else to be able to steer the results of games in one direction or another. However, what I will say is that when you're Rudy Gobert and you do that, and again, I know what he was trying to say, and he came out and said it in the post-game press conference that he was making the connection between sports books and NBA officials and the league. So that's clearly an accusation that I'm not sure has any merit to it. But yet at the same time, there's a part of you that's like, here we are, we're finding Rudy Gobert, whatever, $100,000. And yet the NBA is taking millions and millions and millions of dollars from these online sports books. It seems a little bit hypocritical or disingenuous that for so long these leagues tried to avoid, like the plague, gambling. And gambling was this ultimate taboo. You couldn't talk about it. They didn't want to be anywhere near it. And then all of a sudden, as the world sort of shifted, now there's tons and tons and tons and tons of money coming into the league as a result of these partnerships with gambling organizations. And now suddenly everybody's got a smile on their face and is glad handing, and we're happy to take these casinos and sports books money. It seems just a little bit hypocritical to me. And so that's how when I look at it, look, it was dumb of Gobert. And I think what he's insinuating is not true. Yet at the same time, it does feel a little slimy that the league can find someone for what Gobert did and yet turn around and they're fining Gobert with one hand, and with their other hand, they're reaching out and taking money from the casinos on the other. That to me seems a little bit hypocritical.
Mike, I want you to know I have not placed a bet since January 1.
All right.
I closed all my accounts.
All done.
When I found out that I had won money on the year, but I was going to pay because of my taxes more than I had made, so I closed it out.
It's not good. There you go. Well, it's probably a good move.
Closed it out.
Probably a good move in the long. Probably a good move in the long run. I'll give you credit for closing it out. So
closing it out.
Close it out.
Anyways, all right. So we're going to transition to the West, and obviously we've kind of hit on a few things in the West, but the big thing that I wanted to bring up was Luka Doncic's amazing stretch right now, triple doubles. I don't think there's anyone that could say that he isn't the hottest player in the NBA right now, right? He's clearly the hottest.
If his team was higher if his team was higher in the standings, he would be right there for consideration for the MVP. I mean, when you look at his statistics, it's kind of ridiculous how good that the guy has been. I mean, it really, really is ridiculous how good he's played. And it's just a matter of fact that his team isn't probably high enough in the standings for him to crack. I'm guessing he probably finishes fourth at this point.
Yeah. Well, He had 6 straight triple doubles. He's the first player in NBA history to have 6 consecutive triple doubles with 30 points. And then last night he had 27 points, but he got a triple double as well on top of that. So his streak of 30-point triple doubles got broken. But he's just, just out of his mind, Mike. His stats.
Where does Dallas finish? Go ahead, read the stats.
Well, I was going to say his stats since the All-Star break. He's averaging 36.4 points per game on 64% true shooting percentage, 10.2 rebounds per game, 11.4 assists, 51% from the field, 41% from 3, 86% from the line. Since the All-Star break, he's first in points per game, first in assists per game, first in triple doubles, second in double doubles, 15th in rebounds per game, and second in rebounding per game for guards. I'd be interested. I would have to imagine Josh Hart is the only guard that's beating him right now in rebounds per game, because he had 19 point rebounds tonight. Josh Hart, and I know he had a lot against us too.
He's averaging like 44 minutes a game or 45 minutes a game.
Iron Man,
2
baby.
weeks. Yeah.
Iron Josh Hart.
So,
anyways, listen. Where does Dallas finish? I mean,
yeah, where do they finish? Do they get out of the play-in?
I think they're out of the play-in. Like
who do they bump though? So you're talking about they're
Oh wait. I thought you were saying are they going to win the play-in? I misinterpreted what you were saying.
I think if they stay in the play-in, I think they get out of the play-in and they end up in the quote real playoffs. My question is, can they? And look, they're a game behind Phoenix and they're 2.5 games behind New Orleans. Can they get up into that 5 or 6 slot? I mean, I know they can. What's your thought? Do you think they will?
I think they could get up ahead. New Orleans would be the team, right? That would be the team that would fall out of the teams up
No,
there.
I think Phoenix. I think Phoenix would fall out because somebody goes down with an injury. If Phoenix stays healthy, I think Phoenix stays in the top six. And I think New Orleans has enough of a cushion. And knock on wood, they've been extremely healthy.
Well, they're
And
playing
I
the
think
Cavs tomorrow night, Mike.
they have a pretty good schedule coming down the stretch. I believe that they have, I think I was reading it somewhere, that they have 4 more home games than they do away games in their remaining, whatever they have, 16 or 17 games. So I think they have a lot of the projections that are out there have them almost a lock to make it and remain in the top 6. So to me, I think Phoenix would be the team that would fall out if one of the Booker, Durant, Beal combo goes out for any significant length of time. Then I think Dallas would be able to climb back up. I look at Dallas, honestly, I feel like Dallas is not similar to the Cavs in a sense of the style of play or any of that kind of stuff. But I feel like Dallas is kind of one of those teams that you could look up on a given night and they're beating one of the top teams in either conference. And then you could look a night later and they're getting beat by one of the teams near the bottom. They just seem like they're, despite the consistency of Luka, the rest of their team seems very, very inconsistent. And that's kind of produced this sort of up and down record. Like before they started winning, before they won 3 in a row here, they had lost what, 5, I think 5 out of 6, maybe something like that. And so they're just, to me, they're just not a very consistent team. So I kind of expect that they're going to finish in that 7-8 slot because I think
So
Phoenix.
New Orleans has 10 home games and 8 away games left. But I'm looking
Okay.
at their
Okay.
schedule and I don't feel like I mean, yes, they have some easy games on their schedule, but here's who they have to play the rest of the way. They play us, which obviously we're undermanned right now. They play the Clippers. Who knows about Kawhi? They play Portland and Brooklyn, but then after that they play Orlando, Miami, Oklahoma City, Milwaukee, Boston, Phoenix, Orlando again, Phoenix. Like that's rough. That's a rough stretch right there. They play the
Well,
Spurs,
you
Portland.
have theoretically, right? So what do they have? You said they have 18 games left. So they have the Blazers once, the Spurs once,
They have
then they have
Detroit once and Brooklyn once.
Detroit
That's it.
once,
And then everyone else is a playoff
and
team.
Brooklyn, the
So four.
Trailblazers again. So they have the
So
Trailblazers twice. So you have 5 games against sort of those bottom feeder teams in either conference. I don't know. I think New Orleans has enough of a lead, and I think that schedule is just, I don't want to say soft enough, but just enough that I think they'll be able to stay out of the play-in. And I think Phoenix probably stays in there, although if I was going to bump a team out to put Dallas in there, I would probably bump out Phoenix due to injury as opposed to the Pelicans.
Okay. Listen,
But
I'm not
I
saying
kind
you're
of,
wrong, Mike. I'm just.
no, I know. I know.
Yeah, but then oh man, when I look at Dallas's schedule, I mean, I don't really want to need to read all these off, but Golden State, I mean, okay. Then they play Utah, Sacramento, Houston, Atlanta. They play Golden State 3 times the rest of the way. They play Houston twice the rest of the way. They play Detroit. Yeah, I mean, I think Dallas has an easier schedule for sure. Just, I mean, they're playing Golden
First
State.
glance, yeah,
Yeah,
I got you.
We'll see. We'll see. Two
Well,
and a half
you want to
games is
play
a
Golden
lot.
State right now?
I want to play Golden State right now because no Steph, right?
Correct.
He got
Absolutely.
he did get there. He's got cleared to do court work, whatever that means.
It says he's
Today.
supposed to rejoin practices on Friday. So you would think that if he comes back to practice, that he's going to be pretty close to returning. But anytime you start talking about, it's his ankle, right? I believe.
Yeah.
So you start talking about Steph's ankle, and that's not a place where, if you go back to the beginning of his career when he had all kinds of ankle problems, that's probably not an area that you feel too good about if you're a Warriors fan, coach, trainer, that Steph's having difficulty with his ankles. It's so interesting, look, that we've spent, and all you have to do is listen to national pods or read a bunch of stuff, that it's come down to kind of all season. One of the biggest talking points has been which one of the Lakers and the Warriors are more for real and which one is more capable of going on a big long playoff run. And the honest truth is, unless something I think relatively weird happens, I feel like those two teams are going to be playing each other in the 9 and 10, and one of those teams is going to get bounced before they even get to play a second playing game, which when you consider the star power on those two teams is really kind of crazy. And to be honest with you, like if those two teams played right now, today, whatever, not withstanding Steph's injury, let's just say that everybody was healthy. I'm not sure which one of those two teams that I'd feel confident about in a one game series. If it was a 7 game series between the Lakers and the Warriors, I think I would lean Lakers just
Yeah.
because of their size and physicality. But I feel like in a one game situation that Steph could have a 45-point game. I'm not sure LeBron could at this point summon up what it would take just as kind of a one-man show to win that game. Whereas I kind of feel like Golden State and Steph Curry could generate that type of game and again in a one game scenario. But it's interesting that those two teams more than likely are going to match up and one of them's not even going to get a chance to play a second play-in game, let alone get into the playoffs. So
Yeah.
it'll be really interesting if those two teams end up being the 9-10 play-in game in the Western Conference,
Yeah. I
which I
think.
kind of expect it to be.
Yeah. That'll be a fun game. That might be the most exciting 9-10 game or ever. Or it will definitely be. I mean, I
Yes,
know. And
right. It's a
play.
short history, but hard to believe that moving forward you're going to have that's a pretty high level of star power in that game. Let's put it that way.
You go up for the Lakers, right?
Root for the Lakers or think the Lakers would win it?
No, I'm saying you would root for the Lakers, right? Over Golden State.
Probably. Yeah, probably. Although, yeah, I would probably root for the Lakers in that game.
Yeah. All right. Any other what other teams in the West that you want to talk about? Is there anyone else you want to talk about in the West right now?
Well, let's just hit on we've basically hit on every team except for a couple. So let's just quickly hit on a couple more teams. Sacramento, I think when you look up and down the Western Conference,
You know,
just like last year,
Sabonis has the most triple doubles in the NBA this year.
he also had a streak of, and I'm pretty sure that streak is still going, that he was chasing Moses Malone for the most, I want to say it's 10 games in a row. And I think Moses Malone's record was 51, if I'm not mistaken. And when I heard that mentioned, I think Sabonis was at like 47 or 48. So anytime you're battling Moses Malone for rebounding records, you're doing something right. I mean, I think it's interesting with Sacramento because Sabonis is clearly a really, 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 really good offensive player.
It might
And
be
yet,
his streak might be in trouble. Like he said 20 and 10, right?
I believe that's what it was, if I'm not
Okay, so
mistaken.
he's at
I could be
18
wrong.
and 10 with 9.5 left, and the Sacramento Kings are up 26 on the Bucks.
That's a case where you probably leave him in just to get it if the streak
Well,
is still alive.
he's not on the floor right now.
Well, if there's still 9 minutes to go, my guess is maybe you put him back in. I don't know. It'd be interesting. Anyway, I think Sacramento is the team, just sort of like last year, where if teams had to guess, like, hey, who do we want to play? If they could arrange it, I think a lot of teams would probably choose to play the Sacramento Kings. But yet, I feel like offensively, this team still is really good. I mean, I wouldn't want to deal with De'Aaron Fox for an entire series. And last year, Sabonis had that hand injury going into the playoffs. And so during that 7-game series with the Warriors, Sabonis was kind of compromised and maybe not at his best. Now he still has limitations. Clearly, he's not a rim protector, but offensively, I feel like he's about as good of an offensive center from the standpoint of the things that he does as anybody in the league. So I'm not sure. I go back and forth between people are sleeping on Sacramento and they could easily win a series, or is the conventional wisdom right that this team just doesn't play enough defense and as good as Fox and Sabonis are, that maybe that's not enough to carry them offensively to overcome what their defensive efficiencies are. And so I think most people probably lean that direction, that Sacramento's a nice story and they had a good follow-up year to what they did last year, but that they're really not a threat to win not only multiple playoff series, but that they're not even a threat to win one. And so I go back and forth. Sometimes I feel like the team's underrated, and then other times I'm like, yeah, they're right. These guys just don't defend. So I think a lot
Which
of
is
people are going to be
crazy.
lining up to
Which
try
is
to
crazy,
place
by the way.
Sacramento.
Mike Brown is your head coach, and they don't play defense.
Right. But it just goes to show you, right? I think if you're a good coach at any level, what you do is you adjust to your personnel and you try to maximize what you have. And so if you're Mike Brown, you look at your roster and you're like, yeah, I might want to play better defense. But the fact of the matter is that my two best guys are very, very, very good offensively and at best average on defense. It's still interesting to me that De'Aaron Fox can't be a better defender as fast as that guy is. And he's got long arms and he's quick and just, it feels like he'd be a guy that could be a really good defender, but for whatever reason, he's not. So bottom line for me on Sacramento is I think no matter where they finish, there's going to be a lot of teams that if they end up drawing the Sacramento Kings in the first round, that they're going to be pretty happy with that draw. We talked about Phoenix. We talked about the Pelicans. We talked very briefly about the Clippers. I'm not sure there's much more to say about that. Minnesota, I think, is in trouble without Towns. As much as he's a goofball and as much as people feel like Karl Anthony Towns is not necessarily a winning player, I do think that when you lose one of your three best guys, and especially this team is somewhat challenged offensively, and clearly that's the side of the ball that if you're going to say Towns brings a ton of positives to, that's the side of the ball that we're talking about. And so I think as good as this team is defensively, they were already down around 19 or 20 in offense. And without Cat, going to be even tougher, put more pressure on Ant. And so I think Minnesota probably continues to move down the standings. I won't be surprised if they finish fourth in the Western Conference, which, I mean, other than when you start talking about hosting a second round series, probably doesn't, who knows what the matchups are going to be, whether you're at 2 or 3 or 4, any of those teams can be scrambled up together and the matchups just are going to be what they are. But I think Minnesota's going to fall a little bit. And then Oklahoma City, the last team we haven't talked about.
Number 1 seed now, Mike. They're the number 1 seed, and they could potentially have 2 lottery picks this year.
Yep.
Because they have Houston's pick, but it's top 10 protected. And then who's the other? Say if someone else's pick, but it's the top 4 protected. Who is it?
Do they have a Brooklyn pick? Maybe.
I literally just saw them go, and they have the Clippers pick that's not protected at all.
Okay.
Let's see if I can
Oklahoma City is set up to do kind of and go in whatever direction that they want to go from this day moving forward. And they're going to have a lot of options come the off season to try to improve and upgrade their roster and put the right group, whatever that may be, around Shea and Chet Holmgren and wing Jalen Williams. We'll have to see. But I think when you look at Oklahoma City, what you have to wonder about when it comes time for the playoffs is how are they going to play when it comes to playing against an experienced team that is older and full of veterans. So you look at, okay, if the Lakers or Golden State end up being the 8th seed and Oklahoma City's 1, you're talking about 2 teams that are going to have either LeBron James or Steph Curry on those teams playing against a team in Oklahoma City that has never really done anything in the playoffs, and none of their key players have been a part of that type of championship run. And clearly they've had a much, much, much better season than the Lakers or the Warriors. But when you look at it and you say, okay, we're the Oklahoma City Thunder going against LeBron James and Anthony Davis, even though the records would tell you that Oklahoma City should be the runaway favorite, something in you is going to say, I'm not 100% sure that I feel good about a team as inexperienced as Oklahoma City going against a guy that has as much experience as LeBron does or as much experience as Steph Curry does. And I think the argument that Oklahoma City would go back at you is, hey, we have the best point differential in the Western Conference. We've done it all year. We're going to make teams adjust to us because what Chet Holmgren brings out on the perimeter and his ability to shoot the ball is going to make up for maybe the lack of size that we have inside that would make it tough to deal with a team like the Lakers that has LeBron and AD and Hachimura and these other guys that have a tremendous amount of size. So I don't know. I still think Denver gets to the 1 seed. I'd say Oklahoma City probably finishes second. And then, I don't know, the Clippers have been playing poorly. Maybe toss it up between Minnesota and the Clippers for 3, 4. I'd probably bet on the Clippers to move up to 3, and with Minnesota falling down just because of having to rely so much on Ant without Towns. So we shall see. We shall see. There's going to be, whatever it ends up being in both conferences, there's going to be a lot of interesting matchups that I think more so than in any year that I can remember, at least, that I don't know that the seeding, I don't know how confident I'm going to be that the higher seeds are always going to win in either conference, but probably even more in particular in the West. I think you could make some really compelling arguments that some of the lower seeds in the Western Conference, just because of the experience factor, can
Yeah.
get up and bite one of those top seeds. But we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, I don't have Oklahoma City almost just they're young. They have no real experience. Obviously SGA has been playing so well. It'd be interesting to see how they do in the playoffs. I don't have like thinking any thoughts or dreams that they're going to like over succeed. I think they're going to probably, I think if they walked into if they got to this, they won a playoff series, I think they would deem that as a successful season. They just have such draft capital. I think it's a Nets pick, by the way. I don't they have such draft capital, like, that they're going to be able to do a lot of things for a long time. Like, it's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah, I think the thing with Oklahoma City that you have to say is, one, I don't have any question that Shea is going to play well in the playoffs as a number one option. I think the question just becomes around them, is that team collectively as a group, are those young guys ready to perform at the type of level that they would need to get to the NBA finals? And I'm not sure. That doesn't happen very often in year one of a team's iteration. And this is really year one of this team's iteration. So I think this year, whatever you get, especially if you can win one playoff series, get to the second round, get that experience of what that feels like, and then you come back next year with whatever your roster looks like in terms of upgrades and free agents and all the different options that Sam Presti and the Thunder have. They'll probably look at it as a disappointment if they don't make the Western Conference Finals. But I think as long as they get a series, if they're a 1 or 2 seed, if they can get one series, then after that, I would look at anything that they get beyond that as gravy, especially considering, again, the asset haul that they have that they can start to deploy at any point to really upgrade their roster around SGA and Chet and, like I said, J-Dub. So we'll see what happens.
All right, we'll see. And we'll talk about it next week, Mike. We'll talk maybe hopefully we'll talk about a state championship for the Olmsted Falls Bulldogs. That's what I'm hoping we're talking about next week.
That would be exciting. That would be exciting for the girls program at Olmsted Falls. And hopefully we'll be talking about a couple Cavs wins too, man. I'm ready to talk about like a 2 or 3 game winning streak, although I'm not sure it's happening. The good news for the Cavs is Milwaukee is currently down 29 to Sacramento with 6 minutes to go in the fourth quarter tonight. So it looks like
did Sabonis score again, Mike? Do we?
I don't know. I didn't honestly look. So
here, I'll look really quick. I'll update you all. Did he continue? Oh, he got to 22. We're good.
Okay, so there you go. So
streak's alive.
If the streak was still alive, it's still alive.
Well, it was still alive tonight. 2 days. He got it 2 days. He continued it 2 days ago, despite their dismantling of the other team. He went 25 and 15 2 days ago. So
okay, so it's probably still going. Anytime, like I said, you can beat Moses Malone and any type of rebounding record, then you are clearly doing something right. And obviously, it helps the Cavs. So Cavs will be only a half game back of Milwaukee. I believe they'll be tied in the loss column after tonight. So despite the fact the Cavs are scuffling, if they can get guys healthy and get it back together, there's still a chance that they can get to that 2 seed, which will be nice. So let's leave it there. Thank you for checking out tonight's NBA episode, and we will catch you on the next one. Thanks.